Welcome to the Grid Mod Pod, brought to you by AEIC. In this podcast, you'll hear from the utility industry's top operations leaders on how their companies are working to modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome back, dear listeners, to the Grid Mod Pod. We're your trusted companion in navigating the ever-changing terrain of the grid modernization. And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Cook, and I'm delighted to be here as we embark on another conversation.
Thanks for having me back on, Liz. I'm your co-host, Ryhal, one of the industry experts at an AEIC firm. So it's really nice to be back here, Liz. You're putting up with me for a long duration of time going through some of these chats, so I appreciate you having me on here. So I think today we're going to switch gears. We're going to kind of keep going down the path we have, but we're going to switch gears to talking a little bit about leadership. We have I got some tough questions for you, but I think you have plenty of experience to navigate through them. But, leadership's this coined term that we kind of have in the industry, but it means something different to everyone. What do you say leadership means to you?
Yeah, so I thought it would be really cool to just kind of dive into a topic when we think about, and what we've been talking about on this podcast is really a lot of transformational change that's occurring. When the word, grid modernization is spoken about, I really believe it's an essence of like how the utility space and all of the stakeholders that are involved need to show up differently. And so with that, requires a certain type of leadership to really drive a cultural change within many various organizations. So I really wanted and look forward to the opportunity to share the insight as we talk through this, because I think we're both in a space where we're leading large projects or programs and really working through the dynamics of not really the what, which is kind of the technology and the foundation of the grid, but really even the why, because we can talk about like what's happening in the industry and why we need to like really do and make these changes that we're going to discuss throughout the season. But it's really, I think, important to talk about the who and really the how. And so it's going to require people. And so at a certain level within organizations, it's really showing up in a space and that we can be leading in really any area of our expertise, but driving those conversations and creating that like alignment across various groups. So I know you asked me what I think leadership is, but I just wanted to also take a moment, with the AEIC organization that sponsors the podcast, I found this group in 2017 when I was already in the industry for, 12 years. And quite frankly, it is the oldest standing industry membership group. So what does that mean? Started by Thomas Edison. He ultimately brought together a bunch of cohorts that were running generation plants that, were starting up in that time to get together and talk about the phenomena of electrical power. And so ever since then, the utilities across, we have 185 utility members get together and talk about all various topics. And that in itself shows a leadership perspective because, thinking about what are we doing, it's really, it's really easy to talk about the problems and to really see and really discuss them, but it's really hard to like drill down and find the vision to drive the solutions to those problems. And I think this space that's created through AEIC gives us that. So I just wanted the opportunity to share that, the leaders of the organization have this collective group that allows us to really share all of the things that are happening on the grid. So I'll throw it back to you from your position, and then we can kind of keep telling you, like, what's your perspective of, the leadership role that we are sitting in?
We use that blanket term, and it covers everything from the industry. How do we lead the industry, and whether that's governmental or government influence, or whether that's an organization like the AEIC that comes in and offers a way for the collective of all these utilities. I mean, if you know utilities, right? They all have different standards, all have different practices, all to each their own. Outside of conferences and such, where you can't get really everybody together in the same table. I apply that same philosophy to leadership when you're leading colleagues or people that you're directing work to. You want to get them to that table. But a leader is not a drill marshal. Their goal is not to tell you what to do, but their goal is to lead you through what you're doing, so that you can find the value in it. And I think there's 100 books on leadership, good leadership and bad leadership. And I think the key factor in a good leader is, do you have the empathy and the emotional support to take the individuals through a project or through a program so that they feel like they have value and ownership in it, so they find some real value in it. So that's, I mean, we could talk about
Right.
leadership for about 10 hours, but that's kind of the highlight for me.
And so just thinking about, the organization and, what it takes to bring together a group of people and really align the discussion, right? And that comes in many facets. And I think so from grid modernization, it's really the first step is, what is grid mod when we're all talking about it? And it can be broken down from the power supply to the power delivery to the generation, and to each individual new technology. There's some sort of expertise or ultimately a vision of where you want to go from you're here today to where you want to go tomorrow. And I think a lot of us get into this, not aligning our roles towards, I like to say, the North Star. So having that moment where you can create something to ground really yourself as well as everyone that's working around you. And so, like you said, leadership really isn't the idea of, just commanding and directing. I think the power, and this really came from my first role in the industry where I had a beautiful leader and really my mentor coach, which was allowing me to sit in a space of discomfort, but teaching and educating and really continuing to ground me in what the purpose was my role. And so my first role was consulting, where, you are not always an expert. It takes time and effort, and having that true leader to really carry you along and really empower you and having those tough conversations is important. And so I think the last couple episodes, we talked about microgrids, we talked about solar development, right? We talked about embracing, grid enhancing technologies. Each one is a very unique, what are we doing? And so when we talk about how to get there, it really, I think, comes down to making sure that we're aligning to the right goals. So,
yeah, and empowering your coworkers. I try to stay away from the people that are working for me or employees, because if you take that perspective, you don't enhance and enrich their lives. I mean, work is part of everybody's life, right? So when you do have some of these newer technologies out there, your coworkers can get really excited over it, really energized by it. The goal can't be, we still have to do a job, still have to get the work done. But if you know your coworkers well enough that you can help them feel fulfilled in that job and enjoy the new technology, the progress is going to be so much more beneficial to everybody. You mentioned you had a good role model. I think that's important. Could you pick out several of their traits, or what you think key leadership traits are that really make a good leader, especially let's target the newer technology that's out there?
When I look back on it and really how I reset and want to show up for not only myself and my family and everyone that is around me, is being a great listener, and understanding that there's listening and then there's active listening. So, not being present, the whole idea where you're listening, but you're really looking for the next thing to say, but really sitting with that person and being able to hear them and then, give them advice as needed, or just realize they just need to be heard at a certain time. I think also, showing up in a space of service. So realizing and sharing and being open and vulnerable that you are in a position to help and support. So creating that safe space to allow those that are around you to kind of see that vulnerability and then kind of follow and, create that energy of stability while also teaching. And I don't think those things are truthfully taught, from in grade school and high school and even college. It's really being drilled with, assignments and showing up and delivering your assignments in, and then you get, you're aced it or you failed it, right? But that, we all had that teacher that really embraced you and brought you under the wing to teach. So I think the other one that I'm fond of and continue to carry through is the development area, like creating an environment of continuous learning, making sure that those that are around me feel as if the work that they're doing is providing themselves value, let alone the team around them. So, checking in and ensuring that they're being engaged, that they're being challenged, that they have the right tools, they have the right, requirements to do their jobs, and just keeping that fluid dialogue. And I think within that space, everyone really wants to show up as their best self, and it gives that great opportunity. So,
Yeah, I think.
What are yours?
I've always had this visualization of, the Great Pyramids. We sit there even in 21st century modern marvel of how do they construct them. And I think, leadership is working together, working with your coworkers and understanding them, understanding their pains, helping them grow, helping them feel accomplished. But as you're building those layers of the pyramid, you're not worried about your capstone. I have no care or concern about the capstone, my KPIs at the top, right? I got to hit my KPIs. I have no care or concern about those. I will help those that I'm working with to lay that foundation on the pyramid, to keep building, to get them to the next level, help them figure out how to build their lives better and better, how to feel more accomplished. And I've noticed more often than not, it gets to the end where it's your capstone and they will push you up to the top and they will put the capstone on for you. And you don't have to hit that target. They do it naturally. So if we reverse the flow of KPIs, instead of saying, I need to hit my goals, I need to bring in so much net revenue, we skip that. That still has to be in our mindset because we're in corporate America. But if we look at our coworkers, the people that are working with us, and say, how can I help you achieve the goals you want and feel satisfied, you'll naturally hit those KPIs.
Since you brought up the pyramid, I can't get the visual out of my mind. So for all of you that have read some of the DOE grid modernization roadmaps or the EPRI documentation, there's a pyramid. And it's a roadmap that really the industry collectively has created to really bring light to what work needs to be done to prepare the grid for this ultimate reality of an electrified edge, creating a new energy economy. So we're going to tie us back to the Grid Mod Pod. So thanks for that lead-in. It's almost like it was planned.
Yeah,
but so at the base of the pyramid is your traditional infrastructure awareness. We all are sitting in this industry with a fleet of assets that are aging, and also were designed based on phenomena and resources that were available 100 years ago. But we can't forget about them because we got to understand the current performance of them, baseline them. And then really it's an evolution of the technology and the data that we're going to incorporate into really all of our processes within the utility. So the next step is really deploying, your system connectivity models, which we're actively and rapidly creating the processes internally to bring awareness of who's connecting, when they're connecting, how they're connecting with what technology. So like an interconnection process. And then the next level up is really bringing in distribution management systems. So you're now able to operate the grid the way we operate the transmission grid, which we could talk all day about these things, but for our avid listeners, I know that we're resonating here. And then the next step, really the capstone, once you get to a certain level and you have the foundational infrastructure for great performance and understanding of the assets that exist, the communication networks and all the technologies to gather the data, bring the data back and make decisions, is getting into like the energy transactive markets. Which, like, from a capstone, when you're trying to build the foundation, it's really hard to create that awareness with many and all of, like, the end goal is to be able to see the transactive electron in each individual customer across the grid. And so when we talk about grid modernization, we're really standing up the processes that need to be put into place, as well as the people that can really perform all these new actions within the utility. And I think as a leader in this space, it's, we need people that really can understand all of the various work streams that are driving you towards that end goal without talking about that end goal. So it's like, that's what resonated with me. Because I think once you say energy transactive markets, people are like, what?
Well,
but it's real.
Doesn't it create, though, a little discomfort and fright? You have individuals that have been a part of this industry for 30, 35 years. I have friends in the industry that have been around that are fighting retirement, and they look at things like a transactional market, edge of grid solutions, where we can simplify the processes, we can simplify the interactions with the customers, and they say, well, that's my job. You're taking my job, or you're going to remove my job from the sequence. And this is where leadership really does come to play, is helping those individuals understand that the distribution system, the transmission system, the substations, the generation is all still going to be there. We're not just
Yes.
dusting our hands off from that and leaving them to the wayside like dinosaur bones. That still has to be there, but we need to encourage them to understand that capstone, the end of the goal, and understand that they are the foundation that keeps that capstone up there. So helping everybody, all the cohorts that you're working with in different departments, understand they're critical. They're not just a part of this. It's not gimme, 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 and then I'm going to forget about you. You're critical to the implementation of the grid modernization program.
And that was a great lead in. Yeah, because,
Speech.
when we think about the,
Planned.
to be a visionary leader, really, we as an organizations within the utility space are the ones that have the assets that are requiring us to look at them differently and enable the transformation to occur. So what is this transformation? Going back to ground zero, one-way power flow. Suddenly we have all new energy sources available for the bulk generation. So just new innovation, new technologies, new capabilities. We can call it whatever it is, but that is what is occurring. We used to only have one source, then we had two, then we had three, now we have like six. But not only can those be economically dispatched from the bulk, we're now seeing it show up at the edge. So now you have your two-way power flow. That in itself is a transformational change. And so the who and the how is the people. And I think to be able to drive those type of changes with an organization, you have a vision. And I think those leaders can also be feared and, as you said, met with resistance because it's a disruption of status quo, and nobody likes change in any aspect of life. That's just isn't that like one of the truths of us as beings?
Fear. Yeah, fear is it.
And the uncertainty, because we haven't really had these markets, or we haven't had these technologies, proliferate, but we know that just a subset of them causes change and differences in how we set our relay and protection, how we create our drawings for our, fiber, and what is important, what isn't anymore. Also, we're pushing boundaries, which is also very uncomfortable as a trait. And again, as I said, just kind of, being a leader that creates the safe space that those that, are resisting change or like realizing the status quo is being disrupted, that there is a place for them. And I think that's a whole other trait that we have to acknowledge and then work together to move through. So
we do have a little bit more time. I want to throw one curveball to you, and I think it'll be a good discussion topic. So we've talked about how to bring people up into this environment of grid modernization. Obviously, grid modernization, there aren't standards for it. There's not standard applications across all utilities. So we're going to have some failures, or we're going to have some learning opportunities. So I use the F word.
I was going to say.
So we're going to have some learning opportunities along the way. We are going to have coworkers that are going to lose their shine to the idea of this. How do we motivate the people that we are working with when we are doing these little trial and error experiments, when we're learning for the very first time how to walk? How do we keep them motivated, and how do we motivate them through failures? Or through learning opportunities, I should say. How do we motivate them through learning opportunities?
Well, one is not to be afraid to use the word failure and create an environment where, failure is an opportunity for us to all learn from. And then also, again, creating that space. Now, granted, we are talking about electricity, and it is, a very dangerous form of energy if it's not, controlled and safely. But in regards to there's engineering processes for those, and there's, a lot of protocols and things in place for us to get to where we are. But in regards to, it's really the upfront lift, which is another thing I think we like want to like colonize the moon before even building the rockets. Is like
Yes.
we're almost afraid to start, right? Afraid to create the conversation, afraid to put pen to paper, to pencil out what could the possibilities be. And it's really that creative think, that innovational, is that a word? Desire with individual engineers within a utility space, because we're really risk adverse. But it's important that we allow us to, what is the word that they use in the innovative worlds or the entrepreneurial world, is fail quick, right? I think that's what it is. So that you can pivot and you really, kind of have moments of reflection and then keep moving forward. So I think this space that we're in, the one beautiful blessing, I think, from electric utility and organizations like AEIC is, since we all have our own assets in our grids that we're managing in our backyards, that are ours to really kind of transform together, we share knowledge. So I think a really important part of creating that environment to allow not only the next generation or workforce to be inspired to learn and grow and fail within, but it's also to get them inside the industry and engaging across, state borders, utility borders, creating the committees to draft the language that's, going to change your relays, that's going to impact your cable engineering, that's going to, deploy the ADMS fleet of technology, Advanced Distribution Management Systems for our acronym followers. And allow those conversations to fluidly flow and allow the utility space to embrace that industry engagement. I think that's something that, has been lacking in the last 20, 30 years, only because we've stood up this very robust grid and it performed as needed. But now with everything changing at the edge, that dialogue and that engagement is really important.
Yeah, keeping them energized, I think, is going to be critical. It's like, speaking of Edison, his quote was, "I didn't fail 1,000 times. I found 1,000 steps to make a light bulb." Something on those lines. We'll have to eventually look that up, but it's not necessarily the failure. We have to encourage this next generation to be open-minded, that we're not 100% sure if this is going to work exactly as planned, but I'm working with you. I'm not chastising you that this is not perfect. I'm working with you because I know there's going to be some stumbling blocks, and you're not failing, you're helping us learn. Reverse that process to they're helping us learn versus you didn't complete the task that I assigned to you. So it was a pretty good discussion. Anything else?
Yeah. Well, I do have another thing.
Okay.
I think
All right. We have time.
And then we'll wrap it up. But if you think about also the electric power grid, everything is very unique, and we as beings look for that solution that fixes all and creates that, one solution can be used across, many forms. And so I think also another space in this where we need to be leaders is realizing that every individual project or, idea will be uniquely different based on the utility, the ownership structure, the state that they work within, and really the regulation that's kind of there. But to remember that any work that is done is a lesson, and you learn by doing. So keep that momentum going, within all your different engineering organizations. So thanks for letting me get that in there as we wrap up.
Good way to wrap that up. So thanks again, Liz, for having me on. I know this is we're meandering through the topic of grid modernization, so I appreciate you keep me along as a companion on this journey. And once again, if you have any questions or you have a good topic for us to battle down the roads with together, feel free to leave a comment, and we'd love to hear back from you.
I agree. And thanks for joining, Brett.
Thanks, Liz.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of the Grid Mod Pod. Thanks for tuning in. We hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode soon. Until then, keep powering on.